Hello friends, I am Darshana Patel, working as an assistant professor at V.S. Patel College of Arts and Science BCA BBA course. I am over here to teach operating system. This is second video of my lecture series, and so if you have not watched part 1, then I request you to first watch part 1 of my lecture series. Today I am going to discuss about process scheduling. So let's start. Before understanding process scheduling, let us understand two concepts, that is multiprogramming and multitasking. Multitasking is also known as time sharing. So the objective of multiprocessing is to keep CPU busy all the time. This means that there must be some process running all the time. So let us understand this using diagram. So let us suppose a system is single process system. That means it can execute only one process at a time. Now suppose 3 process comes for execution. So what will happen? So in this case, first program A would start execution. So it will run for some time and then it needs some input output operations. And so CPU has to wait till the program completes its input output operations as shown in diagram first. As shown in diagram 1, program A is running, then it's wait, that means it is then it is performing input output operations. Now in the same way, after program A completes execution, program B will start its execution. So the execution of program B starts. Now it is running. After some times, it also needs some input output operation. So CPU will have to wait till the program completes its operation and its execution will start again. In the same way, after B gets completed, process or program C starts execution. Now C is executing, that means it is running. After some times, it also needs some input output operation. So it will have to leave CPU and will perform its input output operation. Now when this process are doing input output operation, CPU is idle doing nothing. That means CPU time is wasted. So now let us suppose that the system is multi-programming. So what will happen in that case? Here also the execution of process A will start as shown in the last diagram, that is combined diagram. So A needs input output operations. So the CPU, instead of waiting for process A to resume, it will start executing process B. Now after some times, process B also needs input output operations. So at that time, process B leaves the CPU and process A is still busy. So CPU will start executing process C as shown in last diagram. So here we see that CPU is utilized maximum. It has to wait minimum. That means the CPU time is utilized maximum. It has to wait minimum time. So this is what is the objective of multi-programming. Now let us understand the objective of time sharing system. The objective of time sharing system is to switch CPU among the processes so frequently that user cannot notice the switching of process. So let us understand this with example. Suppose a person is using Word for typing some report. At the same time, he is also sending or reading some mails, listening to the music, running antivirus software in the background, surfing the web, and downloading movie or some software. So now he is doing all these things simultaneously. And so all this process must be in main memory and running simultaneously. That means must be running all together. So now how will operating system handle this situation? So here comes the concept of time sharing. A time T will be determined, which will be very small in size, and every process will execute for T interval, and CPU will switch from one process to another once that T time is reached. This happens in less than a split second, and so the user is not in a position to identify the switching of process. Thus, in time sharing system, a user feels that all processes are running simultaneously. Now, to meet the objectives of multi-programming and time-sharing system, process scheduling is required. A process scheduler selects a process from the set of available processes for execution. So now what actually is process scheduling? Process scheduling is an activity of process scheduler to manage first, suspend the execution of running process and to remove it from the CPU, and second, to select another process from the set of available process for execution. Thus we had already seen in 5-state process model. Now, to handle process scheduling, process scheduler needs the help of scheduling queues. So what is scheduling queue? Scheduling queues are the queues where processes are placed when they are in not running state. There are three different scheduling queues that are used by process scheduler. They are job queue, device queue, ready queue. So what is job queue? Job queue is a queue that consists of all the process in the system. This means that when a process enters the system, that is, when a process is first created, at that time it is placed in job queue. Job queue resides on mass storage device, and the process waits till they are brought into the main memory for execution. Second is ready queue. Ready queue is a queue that consists of a set of all processes that resides in main memory and are in ready state waiting for their turn to execute. A new process is always put in ready queue. And the last one is device queue. Device queue is a queue that consists of set of processes that wants to perform input output operations and so are waiting for the allocation of the required input output device. There are unique device queue available for each different types of IO device. Process scheduler. Process scheduler is a special system software that manages scheduling. This means it manages the scheduling of process from different queues, allocation of CPU to these processes, and the removal of processes from the CPU. Process schedulers are of three types: long-term scheduler, short-term scheduler, and medium-term scheduler. Now let us look at each of these schedulers in detail. Long-term scheduler is a scheduler that selects a process from job queue and loads it into the main memory for execution. It is also called job scheduler. Now let us understand what this definition means. So when a process enters the system, they are placed in job queue that resides on mass storage device. Now when there is a space in main memory and main memory is in position to accept a new process, at that time long-term scheduler selects a process from the set of processes that exist in the job queue. Now the process in the job queue are of two types: CPU bound process and IO bound process. So what is IO bound process? IO bound process are those processes that are busy performing input output operations for majority of the time and they need very little CPU time. What is CPU bound process. CPU bound process are those process that needs to perform very little input output operations and spend most of their time executing CPU. So it is the job of long term scheduler to make proper balance between CPU bound and IO bound process. Why so? This is because if it selects only CPU bound process, then CPU will be busy all the time and input output device will have little or no work. On the other hand, if it selects only IO bound process, then IO devices will be very busy and CPU will be free for majority of the time. Thus, long-term scheduler has to make a proper balance. Since long-term scheduler decides when and how many process must be brought into the main memory, and so we can say that it controls the degree of multi-programming. Now, long-term scheduler, why we call it long-term scheduler or why it is given this name? This is because it does not perform the scheduling task frequently. It has to long pause before performing this work. It performs selection only when one or more processes exit after completing their execution. Thus, long-term scheduler selects a process and brings it into the main memory only when main memory has space to accept new process. Short-term scheduler. Short-term scheduler is also called CPU scheduler. It selects the process from the ready queue and assigns it to the CPU. The short-term scheduler selects one of the process from the ready queue and allocates it to the CPU so that CPU can execute it. In order to give the illusion to the user that all processes are running simultaneously, the short-term scheduler has to be very quick in taking decision that which process is to be brought from the ready queue and also has to be very fast in doing so. Thus, short-term scheduler needs to be very active. In other words, it needs to be very fast and needs to be invoked very frequently. The main job of short-term scheduler is to increase the system's performance. Medium-term scheduler. Medium-term scheduler is a process swapping scheduler. So what is swapping? Swapping means to remove a process temporarily from main memory and place it on secondary memory, and to move back the process from secondary memory back to main memory when required. This swapping are of two types, swap in and swap out. So what is swapping in or swap in? Swapping in means to move back a process into the main memory when required. What is swapping out? Swapping out means to remove a process temporarily from main memory and place them on secondary memory such as hard disk. Thus, medium-term scheduler's job is to swap in and swap out process as and when required. Thus, it is responsible for suspending and resuming the process as and when required. The speed of medium-term scheduler is between short-term scheduler and long-term scheduler. It reduces the degree of multi-programming as it suspends a process and swaps it out of the main memory. It is a part of time-sharing operating system. Queuing diagram. Queuing diagram represents process scheduling, the flow of process during the execution. Queuing diagram represents different queues a process passes by during its execution. When a process is first created, it is kept in job queue. When the main memory is in a position to accept a new process, then the long-term scheduler selects one of the process from the job queue and brings it into the main memory, and this newly selected process is placed in the ready queue. In ready queue, processes are waiting for their turn to receive CPU for execution. One of the process from the ready queue is selected by short-term scheduler and is assigned the CPU. As the process receives CPU, its execution begins. Now, while the process is executing, one of the following things may happen. A process execution gets completed and its exit. Or it may happen that process needs some input output, and so the process will leave CPU and request for input output. Now, if the input output device are busy, then the process is placed in input output queue, that is IO queue, waiting to get the IO device. Once it receives the IO device, it performs its IO operations and is again placed at the tail in the ready queue. Or it may happen that during the execution of the process in CPU, the time allocated to that process expires, and so is preempted and is placed at the tail of the ready queue. Or it may happen that during the execution of process, a process creates a child process. In that case, the parent process leaves the CPU and the child process is executed, and the parent process is placed at the tail of the ready queue, again waiting for its turn to get CPU for execution. Or the last thing may happen is that during the execution of process, an interrupts occur, and so the process will be preempted and placed at the tail of the ready queue, and CPU will handle the interrupt. All these steps keep on repeating till the execution of process ends. This figure is the extended version of queuing diagram that we saw in the previous slide. In this diagram, medium-term scheduling is added. Medium-term scheduler swaps out the process that is executing and swaps in that process at the tail of the ready queue. Dispatcher. Dispatcher is a module that gives the control of CPU to the process that is selected by the short-term scheduler. This means that short-term scheduler selects a process from ready queue for execution. Now, for the execution of this process, it will need the control of CPU. Now, this dispatcher takes the control of CPU from the operating system and allocates it to the selected process. The function of dispatchers are context switching, switching to user mode, and jumping to proper locations in user program to restart that program. Let us look at each of them in detail. First, context switching. Context switching means to suspend the execution of current process and to start the execution of another process. We will be seeing context switching in detail in next topic. Second, switching to user mode. Now, all the operating system's process are running in kernel mode, whereas the application code and user processes run in user mode. So when context switching occurs, the dispatcher switches the process to user mode so that process can continue its execution. Third, jumping to proper location in user program to restart. This means that if a process has been suspended after partial execution, then the execution of that process must not start from the beginning but must start from the same position from where it was suspended. So dispatcher takes care of this. Say for example, program was executing and after executing fifth instruction, it was suspended. Now again when this process resumes, then it must not start execution from the first instruction, but it will start execution from the sixth instruction. Now the dispatcher must be very fast. This is because it is invoked every time a process switching occurs. So if dispatcher is slow, then it will decrease the system's performance. Also, the time taken by dispatcher to stop the execution of one process and to start the execution of another process is known as dispatch latency. Context switching is the mechanism to store and restore the state or context of the CPU in process control block so that process execution can be resumed from the same point at a later time. Context switching is a process that involves switching of CPU from one process to another. In this phenomenon, the execution of current process is suspended and the execution of another process from the ready queue is initiated. During context switching, the system must save the current context or the state of the process that is being executed and loads the saved state of new process. The context switching process is so fast that it gives us illusion that all the processes are being executed at same time. Context switching can occur first when an interrupt occurs, or second when the scheduler switches the CPU from executing one process to another. Now let us understand context switching with an example. As shown in diagram, we are going to consider two processes, process P1 and P2. Now as shown in diagram, initially process P1 is running. Now during the execution of P1, an interrupt or systems call occurs. And so process P1 is switched out and process P2 is switched in. Now during this context switching, the state of process P1 is stored into its process control block and the state of process P2 is loaded from its process control block. Now after some times again context switching occurs and process P2 is switched out and process P1 is switched again. So here the state of process will be stored in its process control block and the state of process P1 will be loaded from its process control block. Now during this context switching, that is when the state of one process is saved into its process control block and the state of another process is reloaded into the the CPU remains idle. This means CPU time is wasted. Now let us understand context switching cost. Context switching is pure overhead because the system does not perform any useful activity. Context switching significantly affects performance as lot of information needs to be saved. The speed of context switching varies from machine to machine depending on the speed of memory, the number of registers to be copied and the hardware support. Now during this context switching, following information is stored in its process control block. That is program counter, scheduling information, base and limit registers value, currently used registers, changed state, IO state and accounting information. Operations on process. The operating system carries out two main operations on any process. These two operations are process creation and process termination. Now let us look at each of them in detail. Process creation. A process creates another processes which in turn creates another processes, forming a tree structure is called process creation. Now we know that during the execution of process, it may need to create several new processes for performing some specific task. A process creates new process using create process system call. Thus, a new process is created by the fork system call. Now the process that creates new process is called parent process, and the process and the new process that is being created is called child process. Each process, whether it is a parent process or a child process, is assigned a unique ID so that they can be uniquely and easily identified. This unique ID may be an integer value. Now, each of this child process may in turn create other new processes and thus forming a tree of processes. Now, in general, process needs certain resources, that is CPU time, memory, IO devices, files, etc. to accomplish its task. So when a process creates sub-processes, that is child process, the sub-processes obtain its resources in obtain its resources via two possibilities. That first one is directly from the OS. That means OS is going to give the resources to the child processes. Or the second possibility is sub process may be constrained. That means they may be forced to receive the subset of resources of the parent process. So in this case, sub process or child process may obtain the resources from the parent process. And the third possibility is the parent process may share some resources among its children. Now, by restricting a child process to the subset of parent process's resource prevents the process from overloading the system by creating too many processes. This means that when child process is forced to receive resources from the parent process, so what will happen? Parent process will not keep on generating child processes, and thereby the operating system will not be overloaded. Now, in addition to resources, input output may also be passed by the parent processes to the child process. For example, consider a process whose function is to display the content of a file on the screen of the terminal. So when a process is created, it will get the name of the file, say for example welcome.jpg, as an input from its parent process. So the child process will use this file name, that is welcome.jpg. It will open this file and write or display its content. Similarly to input, the child process may also get the name of the output device. Now, in terms of execution. So when a process creates a new process, there are two possibilities related to the execution. The parent process continues to execute concurrently with its children. That means parent process and child process both are running simultaneously, or both are running together. And the second possibility is the parent process waits until some or all of its children have terminated. So in this case, parent process will continue its execution only after the child processes have completed their execution. Also, there are two possibilities in terms of address space of the new process. First one, the child process is a duplicate of the parent process. That is, child process has same data and program as the parent process. So the only process ID of child process and parent process is different. Second, the child process has new program loaded into its memory. That means here the new process is not created, but the calling process is overwritten by the program whose file name is passed. That means what will happen? When the child process is created, the process is not created, but the child process's program will be loaded in the parent process's memory. Process termination. A process terminates when it finishes executing its final statement. For example, if a process consists of 10 lines of code, so when the 10th instruction is executed, then the program ends, as there are no further instructions for execution. The operating system deletes the terminal process the operating system deletes the terminated process by using exit system call. Now, during the execution of that process, it may have requested many resources. So, when the process terminates, the operating system deallocates all the resources that were assigned to that process. For example, physical and virtual memory, files, IO buffers, etc. Now, if the child process terminates, then it returns a status value, maybe an integer, to its parent process to indicate that it has terminated. Apart from normal termination, a process can terminate in other circumstances as well. Say, for example, if a parent process is being terminated, then the parent process invokes appropriate system call to terminate its child process. A parent process may terminate the execution of one of its child process for the following reason. The child process has exceeded its usage of some of the resources that it had been allocated. That means the child process may be assigned some resource, and child process has used all that resources, and it wants some more resources. So in that case, a parent process terminates the child process. Second, the task assigned to the child is no longer required, and in that case the child process will be terminated. Third, the parent process is exiting, and operating system does not allow child process to continue if its parent process is terminated. That means if parent process does not exist, then child process cannot exist without parent process. So in that case also the child process is terminated.